Hey, Composite Gloves here, and today we're going to be jumping into making that chorus again. So I posted a video about logarithms and the exponential pitch function thing. So let's go ahead and really quick do a recap, and we're going to build the other delay lines here. This isn't a super scripted video, just kind of make the chorus plugin. I've explained the bulk of what's going on. So just going to start at the beginning again because I can't find the original project file and I don't want to open up the finished ensemble because then that sort of takes away from the experience of building it, and it's useful to see it built. So, I mean, now that we understand our base stuff, we've got our input. Okay, well, let's add a mixer. We know we're going to need one of those. So let's do a mixer. Actually, I don't want to use that mixer. I want to use, what other mixers do we have? Crossfader, level mixer, there we go, that'll do. That's the same one, perfect. Okay, now we need a signal delay, or a signal delay. I was reading about like the technical definition of a signal the other day, and it was pretty interesting. A signal is something where one variable is dependent upon another variable. So for example, we work in domains when we're talking about signals. And so we have like the time domain and the frequency domain. And our signal, for example, in the time domain might be amplitude as it relates to time. And we'll talk about this in more detail. I already knew this stuff, but I was reading like the official definitions. And it was pretty interesting having it laid out so clearly. Also, I'm not wearing orange. I almost always wear orange, but not tonight. Okay, so what we have here, we have our single delay, and so we want our input. We're just gonna run mono for now. It makes things simpler. So we're gonna have our mix going out. Actually, you know what? We're gonna multiply our output, and we're gonna multiply. I've explained this before, but we're gonna have 4 extra signals. So we're gonna multiply by 0.5. To reduce our volume by half, just to keep things in range. You could fine tune this to your desires, do whatever you want. But anyways, here we have our mix is being multiplied, and that's going to go out. Also, this is running in 12.5. That may be why my project mysteriously disappeared, because I think I made it in 12.4. Okay, so we have our signal delay. We know we're going to need a sine wave to create our modulation, and we are going to take, and we know our input is going to go out, and we're also going to clone our input, and that's going to go into the delay line. Okay, and then we need a control for our pitch, but we know we need to go from a frequency value in hertz, which we will create a knob to do. So we'll create control. And our knob value is by default going to be very large. We want it I'm going to make it like 10. Not very fast. Our minimum will be 0. And then our step size, we don't want that. We'll make our step size, 0.2. That seems like a pretty reasonable step size. Unlock our panel. And let's move our level mixer over here off to the side. Okay, I'll lock our panel back up. So this is going to go into the pitch. Our amplitude is going to be an amplitude of 1. So we're going to create a control. Whoops, not a control. We want a constant. Create a constant. Name it. Or just by default, it's 1. That's going to be... Now, of course, we're going to have negative values because it's a sine function. So we're going to need to add 1 to shift our sine function up. We talked about this in the previous videos as well. So we're going to create another constant. We're going to move the constant down here. And then the output of this is going to go in there. Cool. And we should have our basic delay. Oh, what the heck? Oh, I have these backwards. This. Yep. And I've also noticed my speakers are not muted, but now they are. You generally want to watch out what you're doing. I've had things blow up before, but I almost always knew they were going to blow up. So it's never been an issue, but you just want to be careful. Okay. And we've got our basic chorus, right? And it's being controlled by our level 2. And it's working. So, okay, we're good there. Pretty much, this is like, if you were going for like the most basic of basic, this could be considered a chorus. Okay, so now we are going to clone it. Let's make our structure, a little bit nice. Yeah, that's about as nice as it's going to get. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this. You're going to hold down Control, and it will duplicate everything. And we're going to do that twice. Now, you could create macros. I'm not going to create macros because it is a little confusing. I'll introduce them later because it's typically simpler to look at. But I don't introduce them here for the same reason that when you're starting out programming, you generally will not always do the best programming practices to make things more clear. And you'll mention that. You'll say, this is not the best programming. So here, a macro would probably be better suited for this mumbo jumbo, but we're fine for now. Okay, so we've got 4 copies of our signal going in. Let's adjust our outputs. And then a good chorus, we have our dry signal, which is not represented by anything. That's our level knob here. And so what we're going to do now is let's vary up our signal like so. And now as we play notes. There you have it. We have a chorus. Now there is one thing to add at the end. So we're pretty much there. Like we've built it. We've talked about all the things, but this is just like in one video, voila, there it is. And I've seen videos where they will do this whole thing in one video and then call that the video on how to make a course, but it just doesn't explain enough, So this is a little more explanation beforehand. So now I can do this video and you should get it. So one thing that'll also happen typically is before we split this, as we've seen here. So we've split our signal, into these 3 delays. There will sometimes be a delay beforehand, and it's kind of textbook that it's there. But they will have another delay. They'll have another, whoops, let me turn my keyboard focus back on. I cannot rename the log. That's interesting. I did not know I could not do that. Okay, we want another single delay. And this delay is going to feed all our other delays. Okay, so this delay thing right here. So there's this extra delay. And what this delay will do, so we will hook this delay up to these other delays. And now let's stop and consider, what does this mean? Well, you could modulate this delay as well, and it could get pretty crazy. But what essentially we're doing is we're delaying our delay, and we'll create just a control for this. We're not going to get super crazy here. So in this way, this sort of controls, well, not sort of. This is basically a phase offset before it reaches our delays to be modulated. So it will change the way our delay will attack. And now we can consider, okay, so let's back up. I want to say that again. I felt like I might have lost a couple people. So, okay, we're adding a delay between our delays. So before, our input just came out, and that was that. Our input got delayed, and then that's what happened. But now we're adding a delay in the middle that we're controlling with this knob we're calling phase. And I unlock our panel so I can move it. So, okay, this knob right here, right? So this is another delay. And let's change it to be, maybe this one will go to 50. And we'll have a step size of, or not a default, a step size of, 1. Or let's make it a 0.2 again. Okay. So, okay. This is basically going to delay before it gets to our delays. So this will shift our signal before it gets delayed. Thus, we could have a bit of dry signal before the delay happens and it hits our other delays and the modulation begins to happen. It's more controls on the attack part of our sound. Now you could consider things like, what if, how would we accomplish phase, a consistent phase relationship? You could consider taking into account structural changes you could make to this to accomplish maybe a particular button setting. It's more advanced, but this is the basic course in a nutshell. And you'll generally see this here too. So let's go ahead. Let's crack open a course now that we've built one, and it sounds glorious. Let's play lower tones. So okay, this is a basic course. Let's look at some fancier ones, right? So okay. Well, here let's just start off with what we have in FL. I have too many effects in here now. Okay, so here we go. We have the fruity chorus. This thing is old. So you see we have 3 delays, or we we have a stereo, 2 delays, 3 LFOs. So we know, hey, these LFOs are basically, we have LFOs going on here. These sine functions are our LFOs, and we've limited their frequencies to these sets. And we talked about that. If you open these up to like much faster values, we begin to accomplish phase modulation. So, okay, that's really interesting. And so we've got our depth, So if we were to control the amplitude of these, which is basically what our level mixer does here, we're controlling the amplitude, we're controlling the amount of modulation that can have effect on our signal. So how much chorus, meaning basically if we turn one up, these are basically depth. So these will have, if we turn these down, our chorus knobs are not going to have as much of an effect. Something that's kind of cool about this particular chorus is we have a chorus cutoff. And so here we're able to actually filter the frequency. So we could introduce a filter into our chain if we wanted. We could get even fancier if we really wanted to. And we could change, at what point are the frequencies, like you could have the upper frequencies not chorused and the lower ones chorused, or, vice versa. And this is actually a very useful knob to have. They also have a wet only knob. And I think it's really more of a button, but it appears in the form of a knob. And it's not at halfway, at least not like what it would look like halfway. We also see we can change our sine wave. These are sine functions, but if we wanted to get fancier, we could add multi-oscillation things here. We could, saw wave, a square wave, whatever it is, we could change them. And we have a couple options here. So you could go way beyond what this offers you. Now it does have a stereo control too. We're in mono right now, but we could begin to consider things like stereo. Maybe I'll do some follow-up videos where we begin to expand into stereo. I think surround sound's coming hard for the future. Who knows? Maybe surround sound will be the standard one day. But anyways, yeah, we could consider stereo now. And on the note of stereo, we could get a lot fancier. We could treat our paths differently. Generally where like the really fancy chorus plugins will come into play. There is now, a chorus is often related to a chorus is very related to a phaser and a flanger, which we'll probably talk about next fundamentally. And then we'll sort of start designing these crossbreed things. The reason we don't start with like the flanger is because we start getting into feedback loops. And those things are just mean things to explain if you don't know math. And it's not just like, you could look at it from simple math. I don't know. It's pretty hard to make simple. At least I'm struggling to find a way right now. But I'll find a way to make it simpler. I think the easiest way is just to plug and chug values through some equations and just show you what comes out. And then you get an intuition on like what it's doing instead of getting bogged down. But I might do some more technical videos where we talk about like signals and how we process signals and open up some charts, some charts and look at what that means. But hopefully this was useful for you. And you got a good grip on what's going on here. This whole structure should make sense. And you should be able to consider some of these additional things I have pointed out. You could also consider things like, hey, the sine wave controlling something. Seems like something that I could use in a lot of places. For example, we know that an effect that's very related to a chorus is unison. And so unison will also generate a clone. The difference being unison, I believe unison is only associated with additive synths. I could be wrong there, but I've only ever seen unison in additive synths. Otherwise, it's pretty much just a chorus. And so a unison will actually generate a whole second set, but additively. So you'll have some signal, and then you'll generate a second set of that signal using additive synthesis. So it's it's much more CPU intensive. But what if we were to move the pitch up and down? Because we know that this pitch variation, what if we were to use a sine wave to move this up and down? What would be the implications of that if we were to modulate that? And we could come back to our basic example here and say, well, let's see here. There's a whole bunch of implications that could go along with that. Because we notice here that we talked about our signal, sort of the period changing as the entire signal changes. And so we could consider that here and say, oh, that could produce some cool effects and some cool timbral changes. And that might give us a reason to use some internal LFOs to do things. That's why LFOs are such powerful tools. So yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. If you found this project useful and cool, thumbs it up. If you built it in some other system, like maybe you used, MSP, Max for Live, there's a whole bunch of them, comment down below. Tell us about your experience. What was different? What's different about building it not rather than Reactor? Heck, if you built it in C++, what was different? So yeah, and have a blessed day.